How did Huggy Wuggy survive the fall in Chapter 1? And what will this mean in Chapter 5? Have you ever wondered what really happened to Huggy Wuggy? If you love Huggy Wuggy, hit the like button because it helps me make more theory videos. Subscribing is free, and you can change your mind anytime. They said Huggy Wuggy couldn't have survived that drop in Chapter 1. But now, at the end of Chapter 4, we see him with our own eyes. That's right, he's still alive, and the clues are more shocking than you'd ever imagine. If you thought the story was over, think again. Huggy Wuggy's death was one of the biggest moments in Poppy Playtime history. When we sent him crashing down that dark pit, we all thought we had seen the last of him. But everything changed once Chapter 4 came out. We got a final scene that confirms Huggy is still around, and it's not a dream, an illusion, or a trick of the light. How did he survive? Why is he back now? And what does this mean for the future of the story? Today, I'm going to break down the biggest secrets that point to Huggy's survival and how the game's lore twists around this surprising return. It's been a huge debate in the Poppy Playtime community. Did Huggy Wuggy really die, or did he somehow make it out alive? After Chapter 1, we only had weird hints and scraps of evidence. There were bits of blue fur stuck to the walls, streaks of red that might have been blood, plus rumors of hidden tunnels under the factory. Some fans swore they heard strange breathing noises if they hacked the game or explored secret areas. Others were sure they saw a few frames of Huggy's silhouette in shadowy corners. But each new chapter left us hanging, until now. Chapter 4's final reveal, which shows Huggy in a dark corridor, changes the entire story. People are now asking, how can a fall from that height not kill him? Why did the game hide him for so long? And how does his reappearance fit with everything else we've learned about the factory's messed up experiments, the red gas illusions, and the prototype that keeps dragging away failed toys? If we piece it all together, we get a pretty convincing explanation for why Huggy Wuggy is not only still alive, but might become an even bigger threat moving forward. Let's start by going back to Chapter 1, where our main character knocks Huggy off a walkway. It all happened right after that intense chase, which ended with a heavy crate dropping onto Huggy. The support platform gave out under his feet, and he took a violent tumble into the depths. On his way down, we saw him slam into some metal beams and railings, leaving behind blue fur and splashes of what looked like blood. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Players assumed he had been destroyed by the impact. No toy could survive that beating, right? But as the story went on, fans discovered reasons to question that final moment. Data miners, hackers, and curious players who discovered that the ground where Huggy might have landed didn't show any big remains. There was no giant, plush body lying there. Only a few smears along the walls led to an empty space. Also, in later chapters, we learned about a set of pipes, ventilation shafts, and even watery canals that run through the factory's lower levels. Could Huggy have slipped into one of those tunnels? Maybe he fell onto something that cushioned his landing? Or was he rescued by something else, like the prototype? The prototype, also known as Experiment 1006, shows up repeatedly in the story. This strange mechanical, biological creature drags Mommy Longlegs away at the end of Chapter 2.
What have you done? You make me part of you! You can't do this to me!
And it might be behind other bizarre activities in the factory. If it's gathering the remains of big toys, like Mommy Longlegs or other failed experiments, why wouldn't it also go after Huggy Wuggy's body? There's a decent chance that Huggy never laid there for very long, because the prototype might have found him and done something to keep him alive or fuse him with other parts. At first, this was only speculation. People said, well, if Huggy died, the prototype would have probably scooped him up for spare plush or materials. But now that we see Huggy at the end of Chapter 4, we know it's not just leftover parts. He's back, and he looks battered but still dangerous. That suggests maybe the prototype patched him up in a secret lab. Maybe it performed some twisted surgery or stored him in a hidden area until he could recover. When fans tried to figure out Huggy Wuggy's fate before Chapter 4, one popular theory was that any sightings of him in Chapter 2 or Chapter 3 were illusions caused by the mysterious red gas, sometimes called poppy gas. This gas can distort a person's senses, trigger nightmares, and cause them to see horrifying visions that aren't real. People said, even if you see Huggy in a quick cameo, it doesn't mean he's actually back. It could be the gas messing with the player's mind. This was half believable, especially with all the new story info about Catnap, a toy that could release red gas to control or scare kids, but it never fully explained the missing body or the weird clues left behind. It also didn't explain the final reveal in Chapter 4, which doesn't seem like a hallucination. We see Huggy appear in the flesh, battered, but clearly alive. The Chapter 4 ending cutscene doesn't give us the impression we're under the influence of the red gas at that moment. This is no trick. It's physically him, and he's likely been hiding or locked away by something or someone until now. Chapter 4 hints that the lower levels of the factory are bigger and more complex than we realized. Each new chapter has shown us new floors, locked doors, and secret underground areas that connect through vents, pipes, or hidden passages. If you check the corners of the environment, you'll notice that much of the facility is run down, making it a perfect place for a wounded experiment to lay low. It could be that Huggy Wuggy fell, survived with serious injuries, and crawled into an abandoned section of the factory that no one else visits. Over time, he might have regained his strength, or the prototype might have helped him recover. By the time we, the players, move deeper into the factory in subsequent chapters, Huggy might have been forced even lower or locked behind a sealed gate. The devs never told us about him because they wanted to build up tension for a big reveal in Chapter 4. And sure enough, that's exactly what they did. So, how do we know for sure that the figure we see at the end of Chapter 4 is the real Huggy Wuggy? For one, his size is unmistakable. Very tall, covered in that same blue fur with those unnervingly long limbs. He's also not flickering or transparent like a ghost or a hallucination. The lighting and camera angles all suggest that he's physically there. We hear the scraping of claws, a low growl, or maybe the faint rustle of plush on metal as he moves. The scene doesn't end with him melting away into a puff of red gas. It ends with us facing him down, setting the stage for Chapter 5 or another future confrontation. The devs are basically saying, yes, you thought he was dead, but guess what? He's returned, and you're about to deal with him in the flesh. This is a classic horror game twist. Bring back the dead monster as a bigger threat. In hindsight, we might have seen early teasers for this moment. Some official posters or promotional art showed question marks around Huggy's status. The devs never openly admitted he was gone for good. They also left the entire bottom area of his fall suspiciously empty. Many fans pointed out that game devs usually show you the body of a major boss if you're truly done with them. The fact that we never saw him on the ground was a red flag. Additionally, some lines from Poppy and other characters are vague when they refer to Huggy's death. They say, "You killed Huggy," or they scold the player for hurting him, but we never got a definitive statement like, "We found his remains." Even if Poppy truly believed Huggy died, we now know she might not have had the whole story. She was trapped, then sidetracked by Mommy Longlegs, and she never roamed the deep parts of the factory to verify what happened to Huggy. One question is, how in the world does a big plush monster survive such a brutal fall? The game's lore shows that Huggy Wuggy isn't a normal toy. He's something more advanced. Maybe his internal structure is reinforced by advanced materials or mechanical parts. We also know the factory toy experiments are part organic, meaning they have living tissue that can bleed, move, and possibly heal. They're basically living creatures, not just stuffed animals. That means Huggy could have the ability to recover from injuries that would kill a human, or at least survive long enough to be saved by the prototype or another experiment. We've also learned that the scientists behind these big toys were not squeamish. They performed extreme experiments, used real body parts, and harnessed strange materials like poppy flowers, or that red poppy gas. Who knows what else they did to make Huggy Wuggy so tough or so resilient? He's basically the factory's proudest creation, right? So it makes sense they gave him some kind of advanced durability or hidden abilities that let him keep going even after a massive fall. In the final scene of Chapter 4, we only get a brief glimpse of Huggy. He might look a bit ragged with patchwork stitches or bandages, or maybe he has mechanical additions. The camera angle is tight, so we can't see every detail, but you can tell he's not in perfect shape. The devs want you to sense that he's been through a lot since his fall in Chapter 1. If you look closely, you might spot torn fur, missing pieces, or odd lumps under his plush. Something happened to keep him alive, but it wasn't pretty. Could the prototype have fused new parts onto Huggy's body, or installed mechanical limbs beneath his plush exterior? Is Huggy now under the prototype's control, or is he acting on his own free will, maybe holding a grudge against us for knocking him off that catwalk? We don't have all the answers yet, but Chapter 5 or other future content might show us exactly how he managed to come back. Huggy Wuggy doesn't speak, at least not in a normal way, so we don't know if he wants revenge, or if he's just blindly aggressive. The bigger bodies are often violent or confused, but some, like Kissy Missy in Chapter 3, seem to show a hint of kindness. If Huggy is back and the story is setting him up as a final threat, we might see him going after the player for revenge. Or maybe there's a twist and he's actually saving us from the prototype, who's the real puppet master behind the factory's horrors. Still, the ending shot of Chapter 4 looks more menacing than heroic. Huggy Wuggy stands in the shadows and the mood is very dark, hinting that he's not here to be our friend. He might even be more dangerous now that he's been through so much pain. That's the terrifying part. He was already unstoppable in Chapter 1, so how much stronger, physically or mentally, could he be after everything he's been through? We also have to remember that Poppy is around. She's not a fan of us hurting the main toys. She scolded us for killing Mommy Longlegs and Huggy in earlier chapters, so how will she react if Huggy reappears? Will she help him, or will she be scared because she knows how dangerous he can be in his current state? If the prototype is controlling Huggy, could Poppy try to free him from that control? And does any of this tie into the continuing storyline about the missing children and those awful experiments that turned the kids into living toys? With each chapter, the devs reveal a bit more about the messed up history of the factory. Secret orphans turned into monstrous plushies, insane scientists, and bigger bodies that were never meant to see the light of day. Huggy Wuggy was one of their biggest successes, so it's only fitting that he returns for a possible final showdown. The fact that we see him at the end of Chapter 4 means we're likely heading for a huge climax. Could there be multiple Huggies? One fringe theory that some fans still hold on to is that the Huggy we see at the end of Chapter 4 might not be the same Huggy from Chapter 1. Maybe the real Huggy died and the prototype built a second version. But from the lore's perspective, that feels less likely. The game strongly implies that Huggy was unique and that using an existing body was important to the experiments. Creating a brand new Huggy from scratch might not capture the same personality or monstrous presence. Also, the devs love to keep the original characters going, so it makes sense this is the same Huggy who survived. On top of that, the end of Chapter 4 scene is framed very dramatically, like, yes, that same unstoppable giant from Chapter 1 is back. It wouldn't have the same emotional punch if it was some clone. Fans want to see how the original Huggy confronts the player. The entire story with illusions might have been a red herring to keep us guessing. But now it's confirmed that illusions or not, the real Huggy is standing right in front of us, alive and well. Or, at least, alive. Huggy took a massive fall in Chapter 1, but we never saw a dead body or even a big chunk of destroyed plush at the bottom. That was our first clue he might not be gone. We found weird evidence in subsequent chapters, like leftover fur, illusions, possible references in hidden tapes or text logs, that made us think Huggy was still out there. The prototype collects or rescues broken toys, like it did with Mommy Longlegs. It's quite possible it found Huggy and helped repair or preserve him. The game introduced a gas that causes hallucinations, making it harder to know what's real. Some sightings of Huggy could have been illusions, but that no longer matters because his reappearance at the end of Chapter 4 is clearly not a hallucination. The final scene in Chapter 4 shows Huggy, alive in rough shape, but definitely breathing. That means all the "is he dead" debates are settled. He survived. The story seems to be building up to a final encounter or major role for Huggy in the next part. He might face us down as an even more dangerous foe. No matter how you look at it, the official storyline is that Huggy Wuggy's survival is real. This sets up a ton of questions for what's coming next. Will we have to escape him again in an even more chaotic chase scene? Will he show signs of intelligence or hidden emotions like Kissy Missy did? Could the prototype be controlling him, or is he running on pure rage? The next chapter or expansions might dig deeper into his motives and reveal exactly how he clung to life. The huge moment in all of this is that last shot in Chapter 4. We see Huggy in that dim hallway, an unmistakable shape, towering fur, those long limbs, the silhouette of that toothy grin. It's the big reveal that upends everything we believed after Chapter 1. The game leaves us on that shocking note, guaranteeing we'll show up for Chapter 5, more curious than ever. That single moment proves that in Poppy Playtime, falling from a great height and leaving behind a little bit of fur doesn't guarantee you're gone forever. So there you have it. Huggy Wuggy isn't just some memory, he's very real. He's alive, and we've officially seen him return at the end of Chapter 4. All those theories about hidden tunnels, rescue by the prototype, or even a secret healing process might have been right on the money. Now that we know Huggy's fate, the story is wide open for new horrors. We have no clue what condition he's in or how much stronger, angrier, or more unpredictable he might be. All we know is that he's back, and things will never be the same in the factory. How did Huggy Wuggy survive? There's no single confirmed answer, but we have some strong clues. First, when Huggy fell in Chapter 1, we never saw his body at the bottom, only fur and blood on the walls. The factory is full of secret tunnels, pipes, and lower levels, so it's possible he slipped into a hidden area or landed somewhere soft enough to avoid a fatal crash. On top of that, the prototype is known for snatching up damaged toys, which suggests it might have rescued Huggy, patched him up, or even fused him with new parts. Finally, the game hints at advanced experiments that can make these living toys more durable than normal creatures, so Huggy might have simply been tough enough to survive. By the end of Chapter 4, we see proof he's alive, indicating that one way or another he escaped death. Subscribe if you want to see what happens next.